In 2008, I was 15 years old and started a YouTube channel as a hobby, which became my full-time career for a decade. By the time I was 17, I was living in LA with my sister and did not think that going to college was on the horizon for me, at least for a long time. And if I'm being honest with myself, I really don't think at that time in my life I thought that I would ever go to college. But around 25, I had what I like to call my quarter life crisis. And I called my parents, I told them I wasn't happy with what I was doing and I didn't feel really qualified to do anything else, and I just didn't like where my life was going. And they were very supportive and instrumental in helping me decide to go to school. I remember my dad saying that a lot of times when people are graduating high school, they don't know what they want to do with their lives, and so it just makes sense to do school next. You can go in undecided, you can take a bunch of classes and a bunch of different courses, figure out what you're passionate about, and that can kind of steer your career path. I watched every single video I could find online of what it was like going to college as an older student or an adult student. I know my college that I ended up going to qualifies anyone over 25 as an adult student. Anytime I refer to an adult student or a non-traditional student in this video, just know that I'm talking about someone who doesn't graduate high school and go straight into college. So I watched every video I could find on what people's experiences were like, if they were glad they did it, if they weren't. And now I am 30 years old, I've graduated, I have a real job. I actually got an adjunct professorship at the same college that I went to. So I went from not only thinking that I wouldn't go to college, but becoming an adjunct professor at that college. I also have a full-time career at an architecture firm here in Nashville. So my life is incredibly different, but I've been thinking about doing my master's. And so I started watching some videos on that, and I was like, you know what? I really benefited from everyone that I watched sharing their story, and it kind of gave me the, I guess, confidence to do it myself. And so I just wanted to put this up as my story. This is my adult college education story. Everyone's story is going to be different. I know mine is going to be very unique from anyone else's. And so this was just my experience, my takeaways. I have some kind of pros and cons that I see of doing it earlier versus later in life. There's still a part of me that absolutely thinks I'm a YouTuber, even though this hasn't been my life for 5 years. When people ask me what I do, the first thing that comes into my head is oh, I'm a YouTuber. And I'm like, you're not a YouTuber anymore. But something about that mindset, I feel like I can just sit down at any time. It can be months after my last video or years, and just kind of open up the lines of communication and share what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. And right now, it's what I want to do. So when I was 25 years old, I was living in Los Angeles, and this is when I was kind of going through that time of not really understanding what I wanted my life journey to look like. And I didn't feel empowered to really do much to change it, just because I didn't feel qualified to do anything else. And I know that that's silly, because there are so many ways that you can get into a career path without a college degree. There are apprenticeships, there are working your way up the corporate ladder. I mean, there's so many different ways, but I also didn't know exactly what I wanted that next step to be. And so I grew up in Kingsport, Tennessee, but I was living in LA. My parents are still in Kingsport. My sister and her husband, they had a baby, and now they have two. They were talking about moving to Nashville, being closer to both sets of grandparents. I thought, if you guys move, I'm moving too. And it just made sense. If I didn't need to be in LA for work, then I didn't want to live in LA. It was super fun in my early 20s, but I just kind of feel like maybe I outgrew it a little bit, and I was just ready to come home to more of I don't know, my roots, be closer, be driving distance to my parents, you know. Picking the right college for where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do was more about eliminating the colleges that weren't going to work for me more than finding the one that really did. I only toured one college. It's the college I ended up going to. I went to Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. I was open to any area kind of around here. I definitely wanted to be driving distance to my mom and dad and to my sisters and all that, but Nashville, because Elle and Alex were also moving here, it just made the most sense. So I definitely picked location, then started looking at colleges, and then a few things ruled out a lot of them immediately. So first off, I knew that I probably wanted to go into the architecture or interior design field. And so colleges that didn't offer those majors were automatically out. Another one is going to sound silly because looking back on it, it wouldn't have been that difficult for me to study and retake the ACT, but for some reason that was not feasible in my mind at the time. I was not going to do it. Like it felt like such a barrier to entry for me. I believe my ACT score was 8 years old at the time. And so if it said that it had to be more recent than that, that was just an absolute no starter for me. Looking back, I'm really happy with where I decided to go to school and my journey, so I'm fine with it. But I do think that if it's something that you're actually really considering, it's not that bad of an idea to retake the SAT or the ACT if you need to. Also, I had done my last 2 years of high school homeschooled, and it was going to be difficult for me to get like counselor letters, and for some reason that gave me a lot of anxiety because when you go on the Common App, there are so many different things that you have to do to apply. And because I'd been out of school for so long, and because I'd been homeschooled and I didn't have the same records maybe or counselor notes that I would have had I stayed in a traditional format of school, that gave me a lot of anxiety. So I definitely was looking at schools that had a homeschool option or that said that they accepted homeschool students. The Common App, I think, has changed since then to be a little more inclusive for students who graduated from a homeschooling program. But that definitely, looking back, that was such a hurdle in my mind and something that I used as almost an excuse. Like, I don't even know if I can because I was homeschooled. And I know that sounds silly because so many homeschooled people go to college, but mine was a little bit different. I did 2 years in one. I doubled up on a bunch of credits. I moved to LA. I kind of like abandoned school at that point in my life. And it was something that I questioned whether that was going to hurt my chances of getting into a college. I did not have the best GPA in high school. It wasn't something that I cared too much about when I was in high school, which is funny because I ended up graduating summa cum laude, which is highest honors at Belmont. And I am not like a high honors student. I was never straight A's, but I'll get into why I think that happened. Because it was definitely like something that drove me. I wanted to be able to prove that I could if I put my mind to it. So it was kind of like an internal like competition with myself. 2 more things were really important to me. I wanted to make sure that I could live off campus, which most colleges, if they do require you to live on campus for the first couple of years, you're exempt if you're an adult student or a non-traditional student. Or I know at Belmont it was over 25, you had the option, or if you lived with a family member. But I wanted to make sure that I could move into my own place. I could have Professor Tedward with me. That was my dog at the time. He has since passed. It is very sad. And I'm still not over it, but I wanted to make sure that like I could control that area of my life. And then the last one was the acceptance rate. I wasn't going to apply to somewhere that had like a 16% acceptance rate. It just wasn't in my reality to do that at the time. I knew I was a non-traditional student, didn't have a great GPA, had been out of school for so long. I don't even know if I had healthy study habits back when I was in school, but I definitely didn't have them now. And there were so many things that I felt like were going to be obstacles for me that I didn't want applying to be, it needed to be feasible and easy-ish for me. And that is how I got myself into school, just being honest. So I picked Belmont University. They do have a rolling admission, which means you can apply at any time throughout the year and you will get a response in about 2 weeks on if you've been accepted or not. And then depending on when that letter comes in, they'll tell you like when you're allowed to start. So after I decided that Belmont was probably where I wanted to go, I did want to go tour it, and I also wanted to go back to Nashville because Elle and I had been to Nashville a few times as adults. I had been a lot when I was younger when we would do like cheerleading competitions there, but I never had been there and really explored the city in a way of seeing myself living there. So that was the next step for me. When I went home to Kingsport for Christmas, my mom and I drove to Nashville and I went and toured Belmont. I did like the, guided tour where you're in a group of people and they show you all the facilities and you have lunch in the cafeteria and all that stuff. And so I did that, and then afterwards my mom and I pulled our guide aside after kind of everyone had left and kind of explained my situation. We're asking if this was a place that she felt would be able to foster the learning environment that I was looking for. She was very supportive. She was part of the admissions office, and so she kind of had a little more insight than just what I could find on like Google or Facebook trying to look up reviews of Belmont. And she definitely encouraged me to apply, and I put in my application that day. Was already done before that. I had written my essays and all that sort of stuff, but I actually submitted it that day. And then I went back to LA and I put my mom's address for the Belmont letter to come to for whether I was accepted or not, because I was going to be traveling and I just wanted to know as soon as it got in. So I remember it was about 2 weeks later and she called me and she was like, I got a letter from Belmont. Do you want me to open it? Do you want me to FaceTime you? Like what? And I was like, just open it and just tell me if I got in or not. And she was like, okay. And she opened it and she was like, oh my gosh, you got in. Then it was time to find an apartment. And I moved to Nashville in, I believe it was February or March, even though I wasn't starting school until May or June. So I started classes in the summer semester. They were all online, and I do wish I had waited, and this is why. I had never done any sort of Blackboard or Canvas or any of those online class portals that you submit your assignments online, you watch the lectures online. I had never had experience with that. And because I started in the summer, but freshman orientation wasn't until like the week before the fall semester started, they told me, honestly, they were like, we recommend you wait. And I was like, I can do it. And I did end up figuring it out, but I didn't have anyone that could help me figure out like even how to log in. Like I got an email with instructions and stuff, but as someone who had never taken a course that was designed like this, I had only ever shown up to school and walked into a classroom and had like papers handed to me. And I had my different color folders. I did not need those. But I do think it would have been an easier transition into school had I started after the freshman orientation. So my college has a adult degree program where they still start and come to freshman orientation, but they're in like their own little group where it's all the other adult students. And I was not put in that category because the major that I chose it was not offered in the adult degree program yet. They since have changed it and it is offered now, but at the time it wasn't. So because my major wasn't offered in the adult degree program, I was put in freshman orientation with all of the other freshman students. So every single person in my freshman orientation group was 18. There was a 17-year-old, and we did everything from, I remember we had to sit through a lecture on like if you get homesick and all this stuff that I was like, do I have to be here? But I do think it was important for me to be there. And they put you with like a team leader who's an upperclassman who is also there to help you with any like sort of, I don't know, questions you have. And so I think if I had started in the fall, I would have been able to reach out to her and figure out like, how do I submit assignments on here? How do I make sure that they were submitted? Or how do I do a lockdown browser if my professor requires it? And all those different things that I was really just kind of like hoping I was doing it the right way, but wasn't really sure. And so I think if I had started in the fall, I would have had someone that could have helped me with that a little bit more. I think that was the most difficult semester that I had, just in terms of like really trying to just do my best and hope I was doing it right. Since I had never taken a single college class in my life, I had to take all of the, like, they call it Bell Core at Belmont, but all of the classes that kind of round out your curriculum. So I had my major, which was interior design, that I took all my classes in that, but then we also had to take like, you know, a math class, a science lab, a writing classes, religion, all that sort of stuff. And so I had started on that side of things because my degree did not offer a summer class for like new freshmen, basically. So then I got to start, as fall came, on my actual degree. At the time, they had an interior design program, but we knew that the architecture school would be starting the following year. And basically, the first year of classes for architecture and interior design were going to be the same. So even though I was enrolled in interior design, I was given the option to basically transfer over into architecture as soon as that school came to fruition, or I could stay in interior design. The first year I really thought I was going to transfer into architecture, but then a couple things ended up happening that made it to where I didn't want to. I realized that interior design, the way that it was being taught to us, it was more of an interior architecture course, and I was learning everything that I wanted to know. The biggest differences were going to be structural in architecture versus interior design. It was going to be a lot of foundation plans, which I didn't care about anyways, and roof plans. Pretty much everything else they taught us in my program. I'm not saying that we are just as smart as architects or do the same thing or anything like that. I'm not taking anything away from architects. I'm just qualifying that interior designers do more than I thought. I had a misconstrued opinion on what interior design was. I thought it was more of picking out paint colors and materials, and I didn't realize that you actually get into electrical and HVAC and everything inside of the built environment you touch in interior design. I definitely thought it was more of like the cosmetic things and less of the actual building things. So when I figured that out, I was definitely more interested in staying in the interior design program. It was also a 4-year program, whereas architecture is a 5-year program. And the architecture college was not going to be graduating their first student until 2025 because they were still getting accredited. I would still be in school for another year, but instead I've already entered the workforce and am moving on with my life, which was important to me, especially starting later. So freshman orientation, I will say, was like a little bit, not awkward, not embarrassing, not daunting. It was just like, it was obvious that I wasn't the same age as a lot of the other people there. Everyone in my group was, like I said, 18. I think we had 1 or 2 17-year-olds in my group. But there were some other adult students in other groups, but they just didn't happen to be put in my group. And so I don't know, there were a lot of questions going around and a lot of things that I was having to sit through, like lectures and stuff that I just didn't feel like really applied to me. And I kind of was like, can I like peace out and dip on this? But I didn't, because I didn't know, what was coming next or whatever. I also want to say that where you go to school, a lot of it is going to depend probably on finances. I was very fortunate that I had a career that afforded me the luxury of being able to set aside this money and pay for my college outright. I didn't have to take out loans, but I know if that is something that is going to be part of your experience, that obviously that is going to be a big part of choosing where you want to end up in school. I made it my mission in my mind. I decided that if I got an A in a class, it meant that I got everything out of that class that I could. That's kind of how I qualified it in my head. And I don't know if that was super healthy because I was so focused on like getting good grades more sometimes than just learning the content. I do think that I kept myself very focused on the actual education, actually learning, not just memorizing things to pass exams, but how am I going to be able to utilize this in the real world, in my career, in my profession? And I don't think, actually, I know that I would not have been thinking that way if I had been an 18-year-old student in college. And I know that because I wasn't that way in high school. And there wasn't a big enough change for me from 17 to 18 for me to have honestly cared as much as I did. But I knew that it was a really big investment and I wanted to get everything out of that class that I could. And so that's why I think I ended up, first off, I graduated early. So it's a 4-year program. I graduated in 2 years and 10 months just because I doubled up on a bunch of classes. I didn't take any summers off. Ended up graduated in May and was an adjunct professor in August the next semester. So that is a whole other story that I can get into. I'm actually not teaching this semester. I've taught 3 semesters. This semester I'm taking a break, and then I'll figure out if I'm going back next semester, obviously. But it was a lot. My daily routine was Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I was either at my office job or I was at Belmont, and on the weekends it was grading and lesson plans for the next week. So I really needed this time. I'm just now starting to find the balance between work life and personal life, but I do think that I'm at a healthy place right now, and I am considering going back and teaching again. It's really just gonna depend on a lot of different circumstances, but I mention to my boyfriend literally, like, it will be every day I'll do something and I'll be like, I should film a video on this. And finally he was like, you literally talk about YouTube every single day, but you haven't filmed in a long time. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't know why in my mind, I'm still very much an active YouTuber. But there are some videos that I have coming up that I am excited to share with you guys that I'm filming on basically my life now. So it's very different from the life I lived when I was in LA and I was a full-time influencer. I am now a hustling, just out of school, making the paycheck stretch type of person now. So it probably won't be as like fun and exciting as my old life was, but it's real and it's my life, and I am so glad I did it. And so if anyone is still watching, and if you made it through this entire rambling video, honestly, hey, hi, how are ya? That was a lot, but if you're still watching, I feel like you probably are someone who is thinking about taking this step in your life. Otherwise, I don't know why you're still here, but I appreciate you. I will say it is the best thing that I did. Hands down, I am so glad that it was hard, and it was, definitely something that if I had kids, or if I, had a lot of family dynamics that I was working through, or a full-time job that I was trying to keep up, I definitely would not have been able to do it in the time I had done it. But I do think that even getting one class under your belt at a time, keep pushing towards that degree if that's what you want. I definitely think it's doable, and I am just so thankful that this is my life now, and I get to wake up every day and do something that makes me so genuinely happy and excited. And I honestly, I don't even know what to say other than go for it. I can't wait to see you guys in my next video. Bye.